the way he was talking about that, we're like, this is fantasy and anything can happen and you can do this and that. I think they're going to come across some way to put Vale into some other body.
I'm not you.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to be you. I am me. And he's started to embrace that now. He's turned that corner from trying to live up to a false expectation, and he realizes that he needs to live his own.
Like that character only exists in those chapters, and he's one of my favorite characters. Like I loved all of that. Yeah.
When that whole thing where he's talking to her and like they're doing all that, I was like, man, this guy's gonna be a really good character.
Yeah, he's gonna be awesome. He's gonna be one of our favorite characters. Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it was like boom, and I was like, God. And focuses in on like real world PTSD.
Yeah.
And what real soldiers and things like that go through.
Like, oh, you just need to get in the gym. You don't need to talk to a therapist. You don't need to take any depressants. You just need to get in the gym. And it's like, that doesn't work for everybody. You know, like clinical depression, sometimes you're just depressed and you don't know why. And there's no reason for it. It just is some weird chemical thing that happens. And like, you can't just go to the gym and get over it. You know what I mean? And I like that Kaladin is like this character. Again, it's like turning that whole masculine hero thing on its ear. Taravangian. So you're saying there's a chance. That's basically his interlude. Hello and welcome to Fireside Palaver, episode 19. This episode, we're going to be doing our check-in on part 2, Our Calling. Part 2 of Rhythm of War. And man, part 2 was a pretty long part. I felt like it was longer than part 1, and there's 5 parts in this book and we're already over halfway by finishing part 2, so it has to be that the next 3 are not quite as long. Of course, usually the last part is the shortest, so
yeah, it goes by fairly quickly as far as those, but still daunting.
Yeah,
as we were just discussing how much time we have left, and I feel like I've been again reading this for months.
Dude, it takes so long to get through one of these books. I got to tell you though, I'm like legitimately getting sad though that we're going to be caught up. I was telling my wife that the other day. I was like, man, I can't. Like I was thinking about some drawings and stuff I wanted to do related to Stormlight Archive, but then I was like, I'm not even going to start on those until we're done reading the book. And am I still going to be interested in it? Like, I'm worried that, I don't know. I'm just worried that like because the next book's not coming out till 2024, you know?
When did the last book come out? What, do you know?
Actually, I looked it up and
2 years, right?
Yeah, I think so.
So you figure 2 years roughly, give them credit, 2 years per book.
3. So it was released in 2020.
Okay. So let's say the next one's coming out next year. So if you get 4 years roughly per book to write and get edited and sent out, and there's 5 more books coming after this one?
Yeah.
No, 6 more books, right?
I think 5 more. After this one, 6 more, because
6 more.
The one that's coming out, there's 10 total.
Right. So we got 24 years till the last book comes out.
I know. It's so crazy. So
should we go ahead and mark that on our calendar for that episode yet?
So the first book, The Way of Kings, was 2010, which, God, that seems like so long ago. Words of Radiance was 2014, so 4 years apart there. And then Edge Dancers and Novella came out in 2016. Oathbringer came out in 2017. Dawn Shard came out 2020. Rhythm of War also came out 2020. And then now this is probably not. There's another novella scheduled for 2024, and supposedly the novella, this is according to Wikipedia, I don't know where they got this from, but it's going to be called Horn Eater. Which I don't know. This episode could just be all about the book check-in. Maybe we don't even get to the Dungeons and Dragons stuff until another video. But I had an idea, given the goodbye that Rock gave to Kaladin in this book, and how, and it's almost like in Star Trek when Worf is going off to be judged by the Klingons for some crime, and then Picard ends up going with him and has to like be his like attorney or whatever.
His attorney.
Yeah.
Picard, attorney at law.
I don't know if Sanderson is a Star Trek fan, but I almost feel like that's what's going to happen in Horn-Eater, is that somehow or another Kaladin's gonna go and be like Rock's attorney, where he's got to help him stand trial.
I mean,
so that could be the novella.
I mean, that could be.
I would love it, actually. That would be pretty cool. But yeah, they have to do something where they show us more, because the Horn-Eaters are such a like mysterious like race.
Yes.
Like that whole thing, there's so much mystery around them. They have to give us something to explain it. But then supposedly, according to Wikipedia, the 5th book is Knights of Wind and Truth, which I believe that is definitely the title, because I think I've seen the prologue is already released to the 5th book. Yeah.
Yes, I've seen the name of it in several places. So.
Yeah. I avoid anything about book 5. I didn't even know the novella existed, but I avoid anything about book 5 until we finish Rhythm of War, and then I'll jump into all the rumors and stuff. I took some notes, but they happen to be in chronological order, but we don't necessarily have to stay that way. That's just, I watched some recaps to help me remember, because both you and I have read ahead. We're already in part 3. So I had to kind of remember like what the beginning, middle, and end of part 2 was. Right. So this is all on part 2, Our Calling. The first note I have here, Shallan and Adolin's expedition through Shadesmar. So a huge chunk of the beginning of this part was that whole storyline where Adolin is going to try to set up some sort of agreement or like an accord with the Honor Spren, and they kind of know that it's kind of a defeated task before they even start.
Before they even leave, yeah.
Right. This one thing is like this journey takes like a really long time. Like it takes them like a month. Just like whenever they're on the boat, and then like another month to travel across the land. Yeah,
they've been going a long time,
right?
And one of the weird things that I was thinking that today when I was driving home and listening, like, because like you said, we're on part 3. I feel like they haven't done a check-in with Adolin and Shallan. I don't even think they've mentioned them in part 3 yet, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. And there was a good while at the end, until part 2 ends, and they don't really mention them very much. So it's like you're kind of left out in the air right now about.
I bet we don't hear.
Going on.
I bet we don't hear from them again until the end of part 3, because if you think about it, if that took like 2 months for them to cross all that way to try to get to the Honor Spren, then the events that are happening with Kaladin and Urithiru. And all of that
happening with Dalinar on his side.
All that is happening during this, yeah.
All at the same time, yeah.
And the interesting thing is, and this is going into part 3 a little too much, but the interesting thing is even where we're at now, and even for the majority of part 2, none of these characters know what's going on with the other characters,
right?
You know,
I feel like each one of these chapters should start. Meanwhile,
yeah. Meanwhile. But in part 2, these were the ones that all started with, they were all notes about, different fabrials and all the technobabble. Yeah. Was that was part 2? Or was part 2 the letter where you're reading sections of a letter? Actually, I'm going to look at something from part 2 to see which one it was.
Well, you've got like, with Shallan, this kind of starts out, she's trying to find out like who the spy person is, and she like,
yeah, that's right.
She keeps receding back into herself, and like
that was another note I had, was that like Shallan in part 2 like is almost non-existent.
Yeah, it's all radiant and Veil, and then Veil in turn it like is forcing her to come out, because like it's like Veil has come to this realization that I don't know if she's like the way that Shallan has processed it up until this point is there's 3 separate people even sharing the same body, But I think Vale at least has come to terms with like, I'm not like, Shallan is Shallan and I'm just a part of her.
Mm-hmm.
And she realizes that if she doesn't force Shallan's hand, especially about, there's all these cryptic things about something else that's happened in Shallan's past, and they're trying to make her come to terms with it. And Vale realizes that like she can't be like, because she gets punished for taking over and selecting the whichever not Ardents, but her people in her Radiant group goes on this trip, and she kind of forces them away, Shallan and Radiant away, and she's like, you're going and you're going. And then I think during that whole time when she's kind of being punished for that, she realizes that something's really wrong here, and if we lose Shallan, we lose
everything.
Ourselves, we lose everything. And
what do you so I was wrong. It's the letter. The beginnings of the chapters on this one is the strange letter. With the beginning of the chapter thing, I almost have to read the whole book and then go back and figure out what that was. It's hard to keep up with as you're reading.
Oh, definitely.
But what do you think is going to happen with Shallan's character? Because this can't go on forever. There's no way that by the end of this series, Shallan is still doing this whole thing. But I feel like readers are starting to love Vale, especially enough that it's like there has to be some like
it's got to be like sort of like take Dark Tower as a reference, where the multiple personalities finally meld and create Susanna. I feel like something like that is going to happen. She's going to like whatever. What does she call the formless? Is the
formless.
Other I feel like formless is actually taking over in spots. I think we had talked about like the spy. I feel like formless is the spy.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if that's true, but there's
a part of me that thinks that's the most obvious answer, but then there's a part of me that says, I don't know if Sanderson would choose that as the answer, but I don't know. I could actually see that being the answer.
Well, one question like that was, as far as that too, that was kind of throwing me off was like her and Pattern.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I thought there was always like this connection, like a 24/7 like connection between the two. But then there's parts of this that suggest that like Pattern doesn't always know what's going on with Shallan or Vale or Radiant, and like especially in the parts where they're in Shadesmar, and she's investigating the little case with the communication box, and she's questioning like who could it be and things like that. And then when I'm thinking about like I said, I thought, well, maybe it's the formless, but then I was like, well, if they're always connected, wouldn't Pattern know?
Yeah.
But then they said other things that were like kind of made it out to be like he wasn't, like when he's outside standing watch and things like that, and like I don't know, I can't remember the specific, but it felt like there were some parts where I was like, well, maybe they're not like 24 hours connected, that if Pattern's off doing something with the other people or talking or doing something else, he doesn't necessarily know
like
what she's doing.
So I think that is a good point. I didn't consider. I mean, they do have like the Spren and their like chosen Radiant. They obviously have a really strong connection, like so much so that Kaladin can like call Syl with like thoughts and stuff,
right?
And he can hear her screaming out in the void whenever no one else can. But at the same time, they also can. I mean, I think we've had similar situations with Vinley, where she's like hid certain things from her Spren, I guess is what she has.
Maybe it's the nature of which particular Spren. I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah. Have you ever seen? My son watches this show called Miraculous, and it's with Ladybug, and it's with these characters, but they have little Spren. I don't know. I was just. I was watching it with my son the other day, and I told Becca, I said, "This is basically Stormlight Archive. They got little Spren." Yeah, they definitely have a deep connection, but it's not like, they're not connected so much so that she probably could hide stuff from him. But I think, I don't know. That makes me believe maybe that the spy is not
that's
formless. Because
I
think
started leaning that way.
Yeah. I'm kind of, I wasn't until you said that, but I think that might have changed my mind a little bit. But let's talk about the box that Shallan has. So Mraize gave Shallan this like cube that's very like it almost reminds me of something that would be in Dark Tower. It's like this weird little communication box. It's kind of fantasy, but it's also kind of sci-fi. And it has this voice inside of it. Is the voice a Spren?
Right. I think she even questions that if it is.
If it is a Spren, how is it because it's in the box that it's not like all the other Spren and Shadesmar where they have like a human-like form? This one's trapped inside this box and still stuck being a Spren even within Shadesmar. Mraize was looking for a way to transport. Oh, but he was trying to transport Stormlight off world is what he was trying to do. Yeah. Not the same.
But yeah, thing, I think it kind of goes hand in hand. And plus, she realizes that she knows this box in some way, shape, or form from when she was a child. So there's that.
I think
we talked about in the last episode where we were like, she's come to the realization that she's killed her parents, and all this stuff. But yet she's repressing some greater evil, and I'm like, that's what racks me. I'm like, what can it be? And obviously, it has to do with this box, in some way.
The only thing I could think is that she in the first book we found out that there's some relation to the Ghost Bloods in her family. Like, I think she had recognized their symbol before. She remembers them having some dealings to do with her father. I can't remember all the details on that without going back and reading it, but but there's been more than just hints. She's confirmed that there's some history there, and I'm wondering if it's going to turn out that one of her brothers or her father was actually a member of the Ghost Bloods, and maybe that's where she's seen the box before, but I don't know what the connection from that could be to whatever she's trying to hide. But I think I get the feeling that Mraize has known her whole life. I do too. I don't believe that they just met in book 2 or wherever it was, whenever they met each other. And I think that's another reason that I thought she was the spy, because I think that Mraize would know how to speak to her in he would know when she's formless and when she's being Shallan and so forth.
Right. Well, see, I got this idea of that, like, so the Ghost Bloods are the ones that gave their family the Soulcaster, and so obviously they've had this thing. And I have this feeling that, like, again, same thing with like Mraize has known her from early, and I feel like the Ghost Bloods and him in particular have been grooming her since she was a kid, and probably with the help of the family in some way, because I think they have bound to have noticed, because they also knew about Pattern, and she had been talking. I mean, she remembers talking to Pattern when she was younger, and like, so she had bonded a Spren. I don't know how old she's supposed to be now, like 19-ish, I think, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
And so if you're talking maybe 7 years, so maybe in that time frame when she was 7, 8 years old. So she's bonded a Spren for 10 plus years before anybody even conceived of bonding Spren.
I feel like Kaladin in even in the Way of Kings makes some mention that Syl was familiar to him. But he didn't. But he felt like she was familiar, but he hadn't remembered or something.
Maybe,
but it's never come up again. But I've just it just seems like these core, like, and it's also weird that like if you think about it, like, it's like in the first book, in the Way of Kings, it's like it was like this special thing that like Kaladin can see this Spren, and what's the deal with this? And then Shallan starts seeing one, and then now in these books, it's just like they're just like recruiting.
They're everywhere.
Yeah, everybody's got a Spren, and they're just like recruiting Spren and all this stuff. But
Now you got new Spren, Void Spren.
Yeah. It's all over, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just it's hard to go back to that feeling of the. I love the feeling of the first book where it was like, they're like discovering the Force for the first time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know what her past could be. All right, this would be ridiculous, but it kind of fits in the narrative we have so far. What if Shallan has always been a member of the Ghost Blood? She's always had, different personas that she falls into. And one of those personas, Mraize has been like training to be like an assassin or something, or aspire an assassin since like, it's Black Widow style, like since she was like a little girl, she was raised to be this weapon, and she has no recollection of it except for Formless is bringing the. I actually feel like that would be too far for me. Like I would
see I had another theory that was semi close to that was that. So, you've got Shallan, and then like this stuff in her past starts coming out, and then, she does Veil and then Radiance. And I thought, well, what if whatever happened in her past caused her to create the persona of Shallan? And Shallan is actually a persona of whoever she really was when she was a kid.
That's exactly what it's going to be. Yeah, you're exactly right. Yeah.
And that's what she doesn't want to confront, that she's not really Shallan.
That I don't know what we still don't, even in that scenario, we don't know what the secret is.
Exactly.
But I'm convinced that is going to turn out to be the case, is that Shallan is not really the personality.
She's not the core person. She's another personality.
No, I'm 100% convinced of that now. You've convinced me. But the thing is, though, I'm just trying to think like how Sanderson would write, and I don't believe I believe this whole Shallan multiple personality thing has to come to a head. Probably not this book, but the next book. And I do not believe that he will get rid of Veil, probably even not Radiant. No. And this is a fantasy world. And I was watching one of his podcasts the other day where he was talking about the new D&D movie, and the way he was talking about that, we're like, this is fantasy and anything can happen and you can do this and that. I think they're going to come across some way to put Veil into some other body. There's going to be some fantasy black magic that's going to happen here.
And they're really going to be 3 people.
Yeah, but I don't think it'll be this book. I think,
no, I don't either.
I think
we'll get whatever the catharsis thing is, and then that'll be like the cliffhanger going to the next book to see how it's dealt with. And I think it's going to happen like with Adolin and her and Pattern now going into the whatever that castle is for the honor sprint. Like I think whatever happens there is what's going to be the thing that starts all that.
That is totally another Star Trek reference. Like the whole Adolin going into the honor sprint thing. And he's going there to like stand trial for
humanity.
For humanity. It's like
Q is going to put him on trial.
Yeah. Brandon Sanderson has to be a Star Trek fan.
Exactly.
What's it's on the tip of my tongue, the name of the episode. It's the first TNG episode.
It is.
Encounter at Farpoint.
Farpoint, yeah, I think so.
But so what about Adolin and Maya?
I think Maya is the key, and the more she's coming out, I think that the whole thing is he's trying to figure out how to turn the honor sprint to their favor. And I think he's going to bring her back to life.
Yeah.
And it's gonna like show them like the honor of humanity. Cause like I think Adolin has been the way he's carried, he's Sanderson has made a point to show you like even the whole beginning of this where he's trying to pick out the right clothes to wear because he knows he's going to see Maya.
Yeah.
And it's like, Shallan thinks it's all cute, and I don't even know that he necessarily is consciously thinking that, but he made it pretty, Sanderson made it pretty implicit that, he wants to look right
I love that chapter.
To be seeing Maya again. I do too. I think
that was
great.
That was such a cool chapter where he's like planning what he's going to wear, but he's like all like it's tactical,
Right.
like for different situations, what you should wear. I like it because Adolin, and there's a lot of characters like this in Stormlight Archive where they kind of turn that whole like masculinity thing on its ear. Like Adolin is like this badass dude that like, is all good with swords and loves fighting and competitive brawling, but then he's like super in the fashion and
sews. He made his the one outfit he chooses is the one he made himself.
Right.
Like,
yeah. He's such a cool character. I like him a lot.
And then what is it? There's I think it's after Shallan gets stabbed or whatever, and she's got holes in her clothes, and he's like, "Give it to me. I'll patch them up for you." And you're just like,
okay. Yeah. That's funny.
But yeah, I think they're the key. Like, and he's also purposely, Sanderson has not had him, bond with a Spren, and I think Maya is that Spren.
It's gonna work out. Yeah.
Same thing with Relaine. And he having not bonded, and he's making a point in like his part where like, don't force a bond from this Spren on me, it'll happen.
Right.
That's a big like foreshadowing thing.
It's definitely going to happen.
Something is going to happen there.
Now was that was that part 2 where
I think that was,
it's the end of part 2 where he kind of says goodbye to Kaladin.
Yeah.
That was a really good part of the story.
But yeah, I mean, they're, as far as like the sea captain Spren, honor Spren guy, I think he even like, there's lots of hints along the way that's like, that shows you or points out how honorable a person that Adolin is. And like, he is probably the best representative of a human that they could have sent. And I don't even know if Dalinar fully realizes that, or even Navani or Yasna, because they wrote all their little letters and stuff like that, and he's just like, those aren't going to help. And I think it is the man that Adolin is what's going to be the deciding factor. And, that's good. I like he is quickly. I won't say quickly, but like he's really becoming my favorite character.
Yeah, he's went from being
Dalinar's kind of like evened out in this book so far.
Yeah,
but you can obviously tell something's coming there too. But like just the development of Adolin from the first books is like really intriguing.
I agree. I think as a reader, the torch is being passed from Dalinar to Adolin to me.
Yes.
And, I put it in the notes here that in this section, Adolin, because we get chapters from his perspective, and we hear how he really thinks about his father since writing Oathbringer, and, now he knows everything that's happened, how his mother died and all that kind of stuff. And I think he's reflecting on how he grew up with, Dalinar and through his drinking phase and all that. And I think that Adolin is, you hear some spite in, more than just some spite in how he feels like on the one hand, he can't live up to the person that he thinks, that his father believes he should be. It's like he can never, him and Kaladin are both dealing with that. Like they can never do the right thing that will live up to their father's expectation. Hold on one second. Let me, Wired. This is what you should have wrote the article about.
Exactly.
All right. Talk to you later. Bye. So they both feel like they can't live up to the expectation of what their father wants them to be. But the reason I think it's interesting in Adolin and Dalinar more so than Lirin and Kaladin, it's interesting in both cases, but I think that if you think about Dalinar in The Way of Kings and in the second and third books, we see Dalinar trying to live up to the image of what he thought his brother was. And then in this book, we learn more in the prologue about that, and we kind of see that, well, that was kind of the image that Dalinar built up in his head about him. And I
but
think
it wasn't the true image.
It wasn't the true thing. And I think Adolin is kind of dealing with the same thing where he's like trying to live up to this ideal that his father has for him. You know, like it's not that, I think it's not that Dalinar is like, Adolin, you're not good enough. You know, I think it's that in Dalinar's mind, Adolin is like this like man that is better than he ever was, and he just wants him to continue like living up to that. But Adolin feels it as this pressure, you know, that he's not good enough.
Well, one of the key things I think in this part is that I think Adolin realizes that and is like, I'm not you.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to be you. I am me. And he's started to embrace that now. And I think that is evident in like his relationship with Maya, or like his, you know, because Dalinar saying like, oh, we got to find you a Spren to you know, bond with. And he's like, well, that's not me. I'm not that guy right now. And I'm not, you know, I'm not the king, you know, yeah, that's Yasna. That, you know, you let her. I'm going to be me. And I think he's turned that corner from trying to live up to a false expectation, and he realizes that he needs to live his own. Whereas I think with Kaladin, he has like the parts where he becomes the surgeon and stuff. Like I think he wants to live up, and I think he wants to be someone that his father is proud of, but I think he is more putting aside who he really is to sacrifice that to be this image that his father thinks he should be, instead of him being who he thinks he should be. And like it's affecting him obviously a lot more, like because of what happens with Kaladin. And but like his father is just like, Dalinar is definitely overbearing. Yeah. But like for who his father is, as far as Lirin, I feel like he is way oppressive. Like it's either you do this or you're worthless. Like
you're nothing to me.
You're nothing. Like and it's and I think Kaladin is doing this stuff more out of fear of that than trying to be who. Like I don't think he's, you know, when his father says stuff about who Kaladin is, he just says you're a murderer, you're a brute, you kill indiscriminately, and you know all this, like what you would like a way far off version of what
Lirin talking about Kaladin.
Like he doesn't see any of the good he's doing.
Right. If you would heal instead of kill and all this kind of stuff. It's like, well, and like, I kind of saved the universe 3 books in a row.
Right. I'm as close to a god as there is on Earth. Or, you know, whatever. Or Roshar. And like, it's still not good enough. And and what kills me about it too is like what these people in general have been through. Like how his father, I mean, like if you're killing indiscriminately, that's one thing. But like, I mean, they're literally in a battle for the world, and his father's still like, you know, how dare you like kill this person? There's not yet been a time when I've seen Kaladin just indiscriminately just walk up to somebody and slit their throat or something. Like it's nothing like that. And I don't I get the doctor's oath of, you know, not that, but you know, there are times when you have to fight, and there's times like I just don't understand how he doesn't grasp that. So, like,
I want to talk about 2 things here. One is, I think it's really, I never thought about it. I guess I knew it, but I never thought about it till this book. I think it's Kaladin that considers this, or maybe someone tells him. I don't know. But whenever Kaladin kills a fused, the spirit of that fused just goes and inhabits the body of a potentially innocent, you know, Parshman or Parshendi. And so in a way, Kaladin is killing an innocent, a completely random innocent person every time.
Yeah, because I mean, like, and the new guy, the Seeker guy, like he he's just taking over bodies left and right and like getting rid of them. It's like, that's kind of crazy.
But then the other point that I wanted to talk about is I understand everything you said about Lyran. I think Lyran's way too judgmental.
Right.
His son's literally saved the Cosmere because we're finding out in the interludes of this book and everything that the stakes could be much higher than Roshar. Right. But I do agree with Lyran in the moment at the end of this part. I do not think that Kaladin was in the right in that scene whenever he killed whenever he killed the dude that was trying to take Teft.
To take Teft, yeah.
I think that I get why Kaladin's character put his foot down and said, no, you're not taking Teft. Like, I'm not going to let that happen. Like, I'll sacrifice my body to make sure that doesn't happen. But I also think that Lyran was right in that situation. Like, if you didn't fight a day ago whenever they were taking over the tower, then
why now?
Why now? Just chill. Because Lyran was even saying, like, we just have to make sure that our people are safe, and in the background, we'll work on how to get in touch with the Queen. We'll work on how to communicate with the other. Like, we'll figure out what to do. It's not like Lyran was saying we're going to go along with this new world order, and this is just the way things are. This is just the way it is now. He was just saying now's not the time, and not here. And I don't think Lyran was about to kill anybody. I still don't think he wanted Kaladin to do that.
Right.
But I think in that moment, I don't know, because what I was thinking, what was going to happen was that Kaladin's younger brother was going to end up dying from the lightning strike. That happens that makes Lyran lose his hearing.
Right.
I thought that.
I kind of thought that too.
I thought, and I was thinking, like, yeah, this was reckless. Like, you should not have done this. They would have taken Teft, but guess what? They would have done the same thing you've been doing with him, carrying him around an empty tower, setting him down whenever.
Right. Well, even Lyran is like, we can fake it. You're a surgeon. Like, they don't know. The only really person that, or not person, but the seeker dude was the only really one that was out
trying to find
get
him.
Kaladin.
Yeah.
And so like he hadn't popped up on anybody's radar really.
Right.
He could have probably got out of that situation. And also he didn't have, he doesn't have all of his powers.
Right.
So like, again, what are you going to do? And I mean, I understand you got to move the story along too, but like that just seemed for the way Kaladin had been acting up until this point.
Yeah.
That seemed out of character almost.
Some counterintuitive
like
to it. Yeah.
That he's all of a sudden now wants to take up arms when like this whole book up until this point, he's been doing everything he can to avoid taking up arms. And I know I know he's got a special bond with the Bridge 4 and Teft and all that, but even Lyran said, hey, if you fight, they're going to know it's you, and they're going to know that we're your family, and they're going to punish us. And he's and it doesn't faze him. And that, like, it almost made it seem like he's making the point of that Teft was more important than his family, which I don't think is true, but like, it's almost in his mind that was. So yeah, that whole thing was, just a little bit weird.
Yeah, I definitely, and I didn't put the connection together until this conversation that basically Adolin and Kaladin was kind of going through the same thing. It seems obvious to me now that we've had this whole conversation, but I didn't think about it at the time. But I think that they both
daddy issues.
Yeah, I think they both did the same thing in trying to, break out and be their own person. But in the end, I side with Adolin. I think Adolin was in the right. I think in this scenario, Kaladin should have either, when the invasion started, he should have started fighting, or I think he should have just laid low until the right opportunity. Or he should have helped. What's the General Teofil? Which that whole storyline was amazing. I read through all of those chapters at one time because that was awesome. So my wife and my son went and did something. I can't remember. They went to a birthday party. They went somewhere for like 4 or 5 hours, and I had just gotten to that that part whenever the invasion starts, and I read through that until the end of part 2. Like in that 4 or 5 hours, I put on reading music and I just sat down and I just read that whole thing, and I loved every part of that whole storyline of, the humans. They first try to hold up in this room, and then they decide if they can soul cast food and they can stay here and try to hold out till Dalinar gets here. But Teofil, I think is his name. He says,
trying to look at his
name.
Teofil, If
there's even a chance that we can wake the Radiants up and take back the tower, like I will die making that chance possible. And I especially loved, he's like one of the first dark-eyed generals, and he's speaking with Yasna. Navani. And the other generals don't want to listen to Navani at first, but then he backs her up, and they have this little conversation where, he tells her that he could tell that the men weren't used to taking military orders from a woman. And I love how she says, they'll wait on me hand and foot at a drop of a handkerchief, but yet if I tell them to, do some sort of battle, they don't want to listen to me.
Right.
And he says that, he knows that Dalinar is the most studied general, like in all of Roshar, and he couldn't read until this year. So
couldn't read or write. So you were doing everything for him.
Yeah. So you had to read all this to him, and those moments were great. And that whole story of them fighting down the stairs, and then getting like 20 feet away from their goal, and then dying. That was such that character only exists in those chapters, and he's one of my favorite characters. Like I loved all of that. Yeah.
When that whole thing where he's talking to her and like they're doing all that, I was like, man, this guy's gonna be a really good character.
Yeah, he's gonna be awesome. He's gonna be one of our favorite characters. Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it was like boom, and I was like, God.
Yeah, and even Vinley. She's like kind of rooting for the humans. Like she's
right.
Vinley is becoming one of my favorite characters. I was really nervous about this book because I knew it was going to be a lot of Vinley. And in the previous books, whenever they did flashbacks with her and her sister, it was like, I knew it was important for the story, but I wasn't really that into it. And the thing I find interesting about her is she is like, I feel like she's trying to meet Dalinar. Like I think that she's trying to meet the Radiants and trying to meet Dalinar, and I think that, but at the same time, she's like, well, how can I get in Urithiru to meet the guy? Well, I'll go with the raid party that's going to storm the tower. She's such an interesting character, and what's the
Raboniel?
Yeah, Raboniel. She's also really interesting. She's got this whole like Sun Tzu thing where like she knows her enemy so much that she like, what is it? There's a Sun Tzu quote that's like, you have to like love your enemy to kill them or something. There's some weird, what was that book called? The Way of War or the War or something?
Yes. The Art of War.
The Art of War. Yeah. The war art something. Yeah. She is she's almost sympathetic towards the humans, but not in the same way Vinley is, And
what's her name too? What's Vinley's master?
I can't think of her name, but she hasn't. She's really not in part too much.
Yeah, but she respects. You can get that she respects, especially Kaladin, because the whole thing. She really respects Kaladin and is almost protective of him in some ways, like with the whole the seeker dude wants to kill Kaladin, and she's like, no, he's mine, like you can't have him and all that stuff. And like you see a lot of kind of like different aspects of the Parshendi, like because you've got the ancient ones, and then you've got the singers, and then you've got the listeners.
And now there's the dudes that crawl in the stone.
Then there's dudes that crawl in the stone. And I'm like, okay, like, but like.
They're called like the lowest ones or something like that. Something weird like that.
But like, It seems like a lot of the ancient ones is, well, not a lot, but like those main two, Raboniel and Vinley's person, whatever her name
I
is.
can't think of her name.
I can't think of it either. But like they're impressed by what humans have been able to accomplish since the last time.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
Especially Raboniel, she's very impressed about the fabrils and the flying machine and the lifts and
how about
all that stuff.
How about the deal she makes with Navani? Is that the end of part 2 or is it the beginning of part 3? I hope it's the end of part 2 and we're not spoiling. But she basically tells Navani, like, Navani's like, why would I agree to your terms? And she's like, well, because you'll be close to me and you can potentially like gather information that you can give to your husband and like all that, like, wow, she's just, she's just like, told her like, it's no bones about it.
The free information exchange, but
but she's so confident that won't be enough to give her the upper hand.
Right.
Yeah. That's so wild.
Leshwi. There, that's her. I finally found it.
Yeah.
And then like the tower is very interesting with the what is it? The sibling.
Yes, the sibling in the tower. Yeah, we almost didn't even talk about that. That's so the weird thing about that whole thing is the sibling was like scattered throughout this book in a few places. Right. And then it became like a really big part there. Basically right as the invasion started happening, you started finding out that the person that was speaking to Navani through the span read was the sibling, but the sibling was speaking to her through people that were like in the like psych ward area.
In the psych ward, yeah.
Which that was pretty cool. And it's so weird. You know what this whole plot line feels like to me, and this I can't really shake it how it feels this way. It's almost like in the Power Rangers, like the Power Rangers have like this cool like little castle hideout place that they have that has all this like weird technology and stuff. Only watching the Power Rangers, you learn about it linearly because you learn about it as the characters do. It's almost like if someone took everything that was developed for the Power Rangers in the final season of the show and then they stumbled into it and they're having to figure out like how all this stuff works. It's like, that's like what Urithiru is. It's like some kind of like, superhero castle. It's Superman's big crystal, palace thing. And it's like all this technology was made by some ancient order, and now they're having to like discover how it all works.
Well, it's like going along with that with the sibling. The sibling is standing back and watching the humans like going, haha, foolish humans, you don't know how to use any of this technology and I'm not going to help you. And then Raboniel and all of them show up and then she's like, oh, wait a minute. I got to get the humans involved in this because like she's really messing me up here.
Yeah.
And now that's kind of, where that part of the story is going. Like, I like the fact that they've got like the communication thing and like, and I like the fact that Kaladin, like he learned all these, you found out he had all those powers early, and then like he only uses the lashing thing or the flying part, and then just kind of did away with the sticking stuff, and now it's back to I forgot we got these powers. Got to introduce these things and make them use these things.
So why do you think that Kaladin didn't pass out, and then you find out in the the interlude that Lift also didn't pass out? And I well, you may actually know from reading part 3. There's a mention of something in part 3, but honestly, it's so small, and I don't even think it's the right thing. I wonder what the true reason that they didn't.
I think it has to do with the fact that she doesn't use Stormlight.
Yeah,
that she uses food.
Yeah, I think.
And so it somehow affects that, but that's the only thing I can guess. And again, I think it's also a way for Kaladin to train more to become more of
that's definitely
a complete fighter.
That's definitely Brandon Sanderson's reason for doing it. But I wonder what the in-world reason is.
Yeah. And I think we talked about in the last episode when like everyone was leaving. I was like, oh yeah, Kaladin's still there, Lift is still there, Verlaine's still there, Renarn's still there, and then like the one so far that I don't remember them mentioning. Well, no, I think Renarn went with them, didn't he? He's not in the tower. I think he's with Dalinar.
He is.
Yeah, he is with Dalinar.
He is. Yeah.
Okay, so like,
and so is Szeth. In the last episode, I think we said
Szeth.
I think we pointed out that Szeth was there, but Szeth, yeah, he's also with
Szeth was actually a hologram, but which is kind of cool. But that whole like, there's got to be something with Kaladin's issue, with him not wanting to be this fighter and this image that his father has of him and all this stuff. I think that's kind of what this is building to with his powers, is that he's been so down on himself. And what's interesting about this part too is that he steps away from like the fantasy, even like just fiction in general, and focuses in on like real world PTSD.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
What real soldiers and things like that go through, and like,
not just that, but also just the PTSD symbolism, and I don't want to say symbolism because it literally is the same thing.
Right, it's like you could put that part into any kind of thing.
Yeah,
talking about war.
It's so talking, direct, yeah.
And like the psychology of essence of it, where like they're talking about having group therapy and talking through your things with people who have been through similar experiences.
Yeah.
And that's like, that has nothing to do, has something to do with the book, but literally it has nothing to do with the book. That's like real stuff.
Yeah.
And like, you see that Kaladin is, I think, again, I don't think I'm bleeding into part 3, but there's a part where like, it is in part 2, because Teft and them are like, hey, you're getting all these soldiers that are like you who have this PTSD, and you're getting them to talk, and they're actually, some of them are improving and stuff. But you're like, you haven't joined in.
Yeah,
you're not doing anything. And Kaladin's like, that's true. I promise I'll get to it. And I think that's one thing why maybe he did decide to fight at this point, is that he's coming to terms with some of these emotions, and the whole father thing too. Maybe all that kind of plays into it, but like I think that he realizes that he's not alone in what he's been dealing with, and that like way more soldiers and people have seen the brutality of what's happened, like, or like him, and I think that's helped him a lot. And it's just those parts I thought were really cool. Like, I did too.
And early on in that storyline, the reason I pointed out that it's not just PTSD is because early on in that storyline, he also talks about like depression, and him and Seal have conversations about like this dark, side of him, or this like cloud that's always following Kaladin around. Seal makes a lot of jokes about it, and I can relate to.
She does too.
Yeah, I can relate.
She starts having the depression episodes, and then he'll be like, why are you acting like that? And then she turns on the dime, like, oh yeah, I'm supposed to be all happy.
That's right.
And stuff.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
kind of all in the same thing.
I forgot about that. Yeah, you're right. But I think that the interest. I like how they have a character that is going through that and just has to admit that like they don't know why, because I think that's something that unless you've gone through it before, it may not make sense to you. Like, because people will say, you hear all these like gym bro guys like, oh, you just need to get in the gym. You don't need to talk to a therapist. You don't need to take any depressants. You just need to get in the gym. And it's like, that doesn't work for everybody. Like clinical depression, sometimes you're just depressed and you don't know why. And there's no reason for it. It just is some weird chemical thing that happens. And like, you can't just go to the gym and get over it. You know what I mean? And I like that Kaladin is like this character. Again, it's like turning that whole masculine hero thing on its ear, where he's dealing with this. And
it also parallels like not only just the PTSD thing, but it also parallels like what treatment for that was like, because a long time ago, before PTSD was, something recognizable.
Mm-hmm.
They used to call it shell shock. And then even before that, it was, there's something wrong with this person. So let's just lock them up and keep them away from people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they're doing in this story. There's a whole thing. Hey, send them to the Ardents. The Ardents know what to do. And the Ardents were just locking them in the dark cell.
Yeah.
And they're like, don't let them be around other people because they'll just, pile on each other and make themselves worse when it's the actual opposite effect.
And I would say, and that's another thing that I wanted to point out is that is, for me, that is what helped, was talking to other people and finding out that they're going through the same damn thing. Like it's not as uncommon as you think. And I think it's really interesting that they put this in this fantasy novel. And in the sci-fi novel world, I think people expect this sort of thing. Like you expect science fiction to kind of reflect on reality, and have some commentary. But in the fantasy realm, I feel like a lot of readers don't necessarily like that in their fantasy because it's more escapism,
Well, most of the ones I've read where there's been like epic battles and epic bloodshed and like all this just stuff, you don't get that. It's just like they have this battle and then they just move on.
Right. Yeah.
And you don't see like from characters that what they did has affected them in some way. Like that's very rare.
I appreciate that it's in this book. But again, I'm coming from a sci-fi background. So I mean, I think and this isn't the first time we've talked about other things, but I see a lot in Sanderson's writing of I don't know if other fantasy writers are the same way, but I see a lot of commentary on various things. But it's not so out in the front. You know what I mean? It's way less so. If you watch an episode of Star Trek, it's like very obvious.
I know, right?
it's not quite as heavy, and I think he strikes a good balance. I think.
Right.
But yeah, I appreciate it. The last note I have is Taravangian. So you're saying there's a chance. That's basically his interlude.
The dumber I am, the more human I am, the smarter I am, the less caring I am.
Yeah.
And he comes to the realization that maybe the dumber he is, the smarter he actually is. And you're just like, okay.
The less predict. So first off, what did you think about this? Did you like this interlude? Because you kind of mentioned that you didn't want. I said Dalinar was just going to choke Taravangian to death, and you said you wanted Taravangian to come to a realization that like Odium was wrong, and
right, which he does. I like one of those tropes, and I don't know if this is necessarily falls really that far into that trope, but like the whole thing where like you're reading a book or watching a movie or a TV show or something like that, and you're just like, if you would just tell this person, this, nothing would happen. And like, so Taravangian has this like,
the diagram,
like moment that he's okay, I see this now, and he's like, he tricks Odium and he makes him see like this part that he's not supposed to see, and he sees that Renarin is there, and that Renarin's like this key, and like he comes to like this realization that hey, maybe we can take down Odium. That he's more human than we think, and all that stuff, and then doesn't say anything to Dalinar.
Oh, he will.
I mean, at some point he's got to, but like. They immediately take control of like, why isn't he like running like, hey, guess what I just found out? And
remember this is the
storytelling too, but
remember this is the end of part 2, so we don't want to dive into part 3 spoilers, but even where I'm at, they haven't dove into that much yet.
No.
But I think he will tell Dalinar.
But I think that's
but I thought that was really clever, a really clever moment. Like Taravangian, he has the realization that like Odium is God, but also human. He is godlike, but he's not infallible. That Dalinar tricked Odium in Oathbringer, and Odium did not expect that, which means that he can be tricked and he doesn't know everything.
What does he say? That he's like Renarin, and I think, I can't remember if this is in part 2 or 3, but Renarin's like says something about how I can see what could be, but I don't know, like, it's not written in stone.
Yeah.
Because actions and different things can change those outcomes. And like the reason that part in Odium's vision is black is because Renarin is the one person that he can't see the future of, really. And so anybody that's around him that Renarin may do something can change that person's future. So therefore he can't see exactly what is going to happen with Dalinar, because Renarin can change that at any time. And so again, like, I think this is all like a big setup, obviously, that Renarin, because Renarin has hardly been mentioned other than like little passages here and there. Renarin, I think, is going to become a major character. What
if book 5 is following Renarin? What if book 5?
I mean, it could be, because like that whole thing with Taravangian shows that the Renarin is like the linchpin, and Zeth.
I noticed
they're like the linchpins of this.
I noticed some. So people that have read this book and are not scared of spoilers probably know. We sound like we don't know what we're talking about. I'm always worried about that, because like we have intentionally not looked at anything. But I was watching an interview with Brando Sando, and he mentions he's glad that he's getting to write in Zeth more. And I thought, you're writing in him more, huh? Like more. Yeah. And so I wonder if the next book's going to dive into
it's called what again?
Oh God. I closed the tab. You keep I know I didn't. It's called Knights of Wind and Truth. Knights of Wind and Truth. Also, come on. Right. We gotta get more. We gotta get more of Nail too. Dude, Nail is like another character that's like so interesting but barely touched on.
Well, the one part there with Nail was very telling too.
Yeah, that's in part 3. It's in part 3.
Was that in part 3?
It was in part 3. Okay. Yeah. We can't talk about that.
Can't talk about that. But yeah, I mean, I think that, like, he's doing it like this universe is just massive.
Yeah, I kind of want to go back. I don't want to read The Way of Kings like over again, but what I want to do is when we finish this 4th book, whenever we have downtime and we're like, oh, should we read a short story? What should we do next week? I want to let's pick like a topic from this universe, and we just try to learn what we can about that, one thing. Like, right now I don't even know. We just talk about the heralds for an episode and what they are, what they mean to the world of Roshar.
It's so good. Yeah. And because like, what's so good about it is like these little things that aren't throwaway, but almost feel like they're throwaway sections.
Oh yeah.
Turn out to be like these huge, like reveals that come out way later. And you're just like, wow. Like, I feel like that's all this stuff. Like, he hasn't dealt with Nell, and then he hasn't dealt with Zeth very much, and he hasn't dealt with Renarin or R'lain. I think R'lain is going to be very important to this whole thing. Yeah. Like, and I think before Finley was the same way, and now Finley's getting this massive build up, and like, there's reasons why he throws these little tidbits in for these characters and just kind of keeps your the spark of interest.
Yeah, like so much has happened, but yet we're still in the setup.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, this is all still a big setup, and we're like,
yeah, it's crazy.
The last 2 books have been freaking massive. How much setup? But like,
yeah,
and we haven't even talked about it yet here, but the whole Yasna and Wit thing, like Wit, just again. So I don't remember if it's in part.
It's in part 3
where he talks about the cows.
Yep, part 3. Don't talk about it yet. But I wanted to research that a little bit. I'm gonna have to Google that because he does it in the 2nd or 3rd book too with a hound.
Right. And
or hell, maybe that's The Way of Kings. That might be in the first book, but there's one where he talks about an axe hound. But what is a hound? Exactly. And then in this book, doesn't Seal go find puppies? Isn't there a part where she goes and finds puppies?
There's a part where she's like, "Oh my god, the puppies are so cute." That's what I thought too. I was like, puppies.
Yeah, and they call every bird a chicken.
Yeah, exactly.
Which that lifts whole thing. Anyway, we gotta end this episode. But part 2, I like this book so far.
I think too. I mean, I really do.
It's so hard.
It's long,
yeah,
but
I can't relive. I always say The Way of Kings is my favorite book because I can't relive that experience again of the beginning of the story and the characters have no powers and then to begin to develop their powers and you follow the bridge. I love everything about The Way of Kings, but I think that knowing what I know now, never being able to go back and be that person again that has never experienced it, I think this is becoming my favorite book. I think there's more in this book than I think in any of the other books.
I really have enjoyed this. And I don't know if it was burnout because we've talked about that before with the last book.
Well,
but like to me, there were parts when I was reading the last book where it was almost a chore.
Yeah.
But so far in this book, the only times I've not wanted to go forward were like, oh my God, I don't know. I'm getting nervous. I don't want to know what happens.
Well, I think it's also you almost have to go back and read them again, which I'm not because they're way too long. But but I feel like part of the reason we feel that way is because now we're reading things, we're understanding it. Whereas the first couple books, it's like I'm just reading. I don't know what's going on.
I still get some of that with the technology. I'm just like, whatever.
I just trust that eventually this will all make sense to me.
Exactly.
I did that for like 2.5 books before I started catching on. All right, well, let's end this episode. And I'm behind. I need to read. I need to read a lot more. I'm not my work schedule has changed. I'm not driving as much, so I'm not listening to the audiobook, but I got a Kindle and I've been reading. This has helped me read faster. So I've been reading a lot more at home. Whereas I used to never read at home. I'd only read, whenever I was either on the toilet or driving in the car listening to the audiobook. Now I actually set aside I'm just going to read for an hour,
Right.
I used to never do that. So I'll try to, but you're still so much faster than me. I'll try my best to catch up to you and we'll meet again at the end of this part. But all right. Thanks for listening. We'll see you guys next week.
Peace out.
Yep. I'm trying to think of something clever to say. I can't think of anything.